Hello, everyone. In this video, we are going to cover Chapter 4, which is all about carbon and the molecular diversity of life. This is going to be a short video because I really want to focus on some key concepts in this chapter. There are some things that we are going to briefly go through. So this is the golden snub-nosed monkeys, and they're very different, unique, even their coloration, their facial features. I'd say a face only a mother would love. But the golden snub-nosed monkeys here are biological, organic organisms. And so, what makes carbon the basis for all biological molecules and organisms? Uh, Carbon has some key special features that are unique to the element. Carbon can form four bonds. It has four valence electrons, meaning that it needs four to have a full valence shell. And so, because it needs four, it's able to form four single bonds with other elements. So, carbon can bond to other carbons itself, resulting in carbon skeletons. And these carbon skeleton molecules are commonly bonded to hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And these skeletal molecules are what forms a lot of the basis for biological molecules. Uh, the chemical groups that are available and the carbon skeletons itself that allow for extra groups to bond to it help produce some of uh, the large variety of molecules that exist on the planet. So, studying carbon is also studying organic chemistry. So, organic chemistry is the key to the origin of life. Organic chemistry is the study of compounds that contain carbon, regardless of their origin. Um, and organic compounds we know range from very simple molecules to what we consider colossal ones that do very complex functions within organisms. Organic molecules and the origin of life on Earth uh, has always been hypothesized and debated, but it was Stanley Miller's classic experiment that demonstrated that abiotic synthesis of organic compounds um, existed and was possible. So let me go through that word, abiotic. Abiotic means something that is not living. So the abiotic synthesis is the ability to produce organic compounds without living organisms being present. Experiments support the idea that abiotic synthesis of organic compounds exists. Currently, there's a lot of theories that it's perhaps near volcanoes or hot springs, and this could have been the stage for the origin of life on the planet. So this here represents Stanley Miller's experiment where he tried to recreate a young Earth uh, environment. And so Stanley Miller, this is the experiment that he did. So one things that he did was that he created a water-based sea, and you can see he put it under fire to create a hot spring-like environment. As the water evaporated, it will turn into water vapor and go up into this young Earth atmosphere. This young Earth atmosphere contains things like methane, for example. It doesn't contain a lot of um, components that are in our current atmosphere, like oxygen, for example. So he also simulated electricity or lightning um, with the electrodes. So as the water vapor entered the young Earth atmosphere, it then was exposed to the elements that were in that young Earth atmosphere, and then as it condensed and cooled, it dropped back down, rained to the ground, and then samples were collected from this experiment. And so, in the chemical analysis for this experiment, Stanley Miller discovered that all of the major elements of life um, were that are needed for the development of life were in that sample. So organic molecules can be created without life. The atmosphere and the elements that are in the atmosphere are there. So it's like, a recipe book. So all of the recipes, the ingredients are there. We would just have to put them together to make something. In this case, it was organic molecules. Because carbon can form four bonds, these building blocks can be used to make an inexhaustible variety of organic molecules. And the great diversity of organisms on the planet is due to the versatility of carbon, because carbon can make all of these biological molecules. Carbon atoms can form diverse molecules by binding to four other atoms. And once again, this is because of carbon's electron configuration, and that it has four valence electrons. And carbon can form four covalent bonds with basically any atom. And so carbon can form large complex molecules and form either chains or rings. And so you can see here, these are examples of all of the complex things that carbon can do. This is just an example. There's many, many more that are even more complex than this. For example, methane, carbon can form four bonds with hydrogen. Ethane, carbon can bind to another carbon, and then the rest of them can be hydrogen bonds. And then, like, for example, you can have a double bond with carbon, and then the other ones can be hydrogen. So there's all kinds of different possibilities that exist with the carbon molecule. And this is just to iterate that the number of electrons in the valence shell is generally the number of bonds that an atom can form. So what is missing? So hydrogen is missing one electron. It can form one bond. Oxygen is missing two electrons, and so it can form two bonds. If we jump to carbon, it's missing four electrons, and so it can form four bonds. The most frequent bonding partners for carbon are hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And it's probably because they're just very abundant in the atmosphere. And so carbon atoms can partner with atoms other than hydrogen, such as carbon dioxide, which is CO2 here. While carbon dioxide is a waste product for animals and humans in particular, carbon dioxide is the waste product from respiration. A lot of other organisms on the planet love carbon dioxide, such as plants. Even carbon forms the basis of, like, for example, urea, urea is the fancy word for pee. Urea is one of the most common elements on the planet because everything urinates. Carbon atoms can also be linked into chains, which is shown here in the steroids, which we'll cover in next chapter. But carbon is responsible for forming these chain rings of chains. And so carbon chains are form the skeletons of most organic molecules. Carbon chains can vary in length and shape. For example, the length can be different. You can add on carbons to the lengths. For example, ethane has two carbons, propane has three. You can keep adding on more and more. The length, I don't know the actual chemical limit, but it's very long, can get very long. They can branch. They don't have to be in a singular chain. They can be in branches. For example, butane and methylpropane here are branched molecules. Uh, double bonds. The double bond can be in any position So you have butane here, and then butane 1, and then butane 2, and it just depends on the placement of the double bond of the carbon. Carbon doesn't have to be in straight chains, they can be in rings. So you can see cyclohexane and benzene here are ring structures. Because of these long chains of carbon and the ability for them to bond to hydrogen, hydrocarbons exist. So many organic molecules, such as fats, have hydrocarbon compounds, and hydrocarbons can undergo reactions that release a large amount of energy. It's important that you guys realize that energy is stored in the bonds. So if you are a molecule that's very large and you have a lot of bonds, you're able to hold a lot of energy. And so that's what fat is basically. Fat is molecules with long chains of carbon and hydrogen. And so fat molecules are stored as, in human fat cells, which are called adipose cells. Now, because of the ability to form all of these different and variety of molecules, isomers can exist. So isomers are compounds with the same molecular structure formula, but different structure and property. You can have structural isomers where they're just have different arrangements of the molecule. There are cis-trans isomers where they have the same covalent bonds, but they're different in their spatial arrangement. And then the funniest ones to me are the enantiomers, which are isomers that are mirror images of each other. So let's review those. So for example, structural isomers, pentane and methylbutane, they have the same number of carbons and the same number of hydrogens, but they are built differently. So they're structural isomers. Cis-trans isomers are based on spatial construction, where here the carbons have two X's on one side, meaning it could be bonded to, let's say, oxygen. So you could have two oxygens on either the same side of the molecule, or they could be on the opposite side. There's nothing that says they have to be on the same side. So the cis and trans forms of molecules can exist. And then there's enantiomers, which basically they're mirror images of each other. And so, like your hands, you have a left and right, they're mirror images of each other. So can uh, biological molecules as well. Enantiomers are important in the pharmaceutical industry because we can use them as to make drugs. So two enantiomers of a drug may have different effects. Often only one enantiomer is biologically active. And then the differing effects of enantiomers demonstrate that organisms are sensitive to even the subtle variations in molecules. So let's use some real world examples. Ibuprofen, which I think most people are familiar with ibuprofen and have taken ibuprofen. The effective enantiomer is faced in one direction. If you flip it, if it's structurally flipped, then it's ineffective. Albuterol. So if you have asthma, for example, you're probably familiar with your albuterol, your pump. Um, the effective enantiomer is in one direction and the ineffective is in the other. What's really cool about enantiomers is that, and structurally similar isomers, is that we can create molecules as drugs to fit into proteins that are in the brain uh, to allow for them to be effective. Uh, and a lot of beta blockers, like drugs for anxiety, or anything heart related, is also falls into those groups. And so that's very important for us to learn, at least for humans and our ability to produce medicine. In this next concept, we're going to review chemical groups, and they are key to molecular function. This is one of the sections I'm going to make. I'm going to reduce the volume of the material. I want you guys to know what are chemical groups, but you don't have to learn the groups. So, distinctive properties of organic molecules depend on the skeleton, structure, and the chemical groups that can attach to those structures. And then these groups can give unique characteristics to life. And the best examples of that are the steroids, the hormones, estrogen, and testosterone. So these little groups that are highlighted in blue on these molecules, the estrogen and testosterone are extremely similar. They have four ring structures, and the only differences between the molecules are the chemical groups that are attached to them, which are highlighted in blue. These small differences allow for the huge differences that are seen between estrogen and testosterone. And this is true for all of the chemical groups and molecules. Functional groups are the components of organic molecules. These are also chemical groups. Another name is functional groups. The number and arrangement of functional groups give each molecule its unique property. There are 7 functional groups that are most important to the chemistry of life, and they're listed here. I just want you guys to know that they exist. You're not required to learn each group. And so here are examples of those groups and molecules that have them attached to them. And so they are extremely important, especially in the creation of example in the amino acids and alcohols and ketones, anything organic related, ATP, for example. There's all kinds of chemical organic molecules that exist because of these functional groups. An example of an organic molecule and the functional groups associated with it would be ATP, and which I mentioned just a while ago. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It is the energy molecule for life. It is the energy molecule that all of life has used and has evolved to use for energy. So ATP stores the potential of energy and the potential to react with water. And this reaction releases energy that can be used by the cell. And so this here is the chemical structure of ATP. It's an adenosine molecule attached to 3 phosphates. So 1, 2, 3. So these are phosphate groups that are all attached to adenosine. And it's one of the reasons why it's called ATP, triphosphate. So there's 3 phosphates. When adenosine breaks down, ATP breaks down and reacts with water, it releases a phosphate and it releases energy. And so this is how plants and animals and all of biological life that I know of uses and transfers energy. And we're going to review organic molecules, the large organic molecules in chapter 5. And then we are going to review ATP and the importance of ATP as the energy molecule later in the semester when we're doing cellular respiration and photosynthesis. But as of now, that concludes chapter 4.